Hello? Can you guys hear me? Also, is this loud enough? I don't think it's loud enough. Give me 1 second. Okay. Let me see. How's that? Is that better? All right. Okay, so this is a little tutorial of the new features in Ponyscape. I'm basically going to go through pretty much all of the new features from Ponyscape version 0.1 all the way to Ponyscape version 0.4. Just kind of as a tutorial of for anyone who's coming from Inkscape. If you haven't used Inkscape, like if you're coming from Illustrator or from Corel or Photoshop or I don't know. If you're coming from GIMP, yeah. I would recommend checking out some Inkscape tutorials, and then you can check out this tutorial to kind of see what some of the new features are. So I have this is basically a live stream recording, and I'm gonna upload this to YouTube as well. So yeah. So I've got guys in the chat, which is awesome. Hi everyone. And if you guys have anything that you want me to talk about involving Ponyscape, just let me know and I will go over it. So let's get started. Okay, so first and foremost, something that was introduced in Inkscape 0.49 is power strokes. And yes, Mahower, I said hi to you. And Mom and Dill. Okay, so power strokes basically allow you to vary the width of your stroke. And so basically, if you create a stroke like this, and I'm going to go ahead and smooth those points out, and kind of just do something like that. And there. Basically, to apply a power stroke, you can go into the Path Effects dialog, which is under Path Effects, or just click Control-Shift-7. Click the plus button and select Power Stroke. In Ponyscape version 0.1, the defaults are all set for basically creating ponies with a nice taper. Hello. Hi guys, just joining the chat. If you're just joining me in the chat now, feel free to ask any questions about Ponyscape, and I will see if I can cover what you are asking about. So basically, if you apply a power stroke, it converts your stroke into a path internally, but you can still modify it as if it was a stroke. Now you can also specify different start and end points. No, Killigouch, I won't. So you can specify your start and end caps and your join caps, which the join caps are basically when you have a cusp node or a node that's not smooth, so like a sharp corner. And you can change the interpolator type. This basically will dictate how the width is defined between these width control points, which you can see here. These little pink nodes basically control the width of your stroke. And smoothness is only for the cubic Bezier Johann, or Johann, I don't really know how to pronounce it. So let me go ahead and just show you how you can taper your strokes really nicely. If you can see in the tutorial or the live stream or wherever you're watching this on YouTube, whatever, you can see I have outlines enabled, and I also have this little directional arrow, which is really helpful when you're dealing with power strokes, because you can define different start and end caps, but in order to tell what's your start and what's your end, these directional arrows are very useful. So to get those, you basically go into Edit, Preferences, select the Node tool, and make sure that the Show Path Directions on Outlines checkbox is marked. And you can see, also, if you click Always Show Outlines, then you'll get the outline. I enjoy having this here just because when I'm dealing with power strokes, it's a lot more useful. It's also very helpful for fill between strokes, which I will get to eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and give my start cap a taper. So I'm going to select 0 width. And you can see here that there's a little bit of weirdness going on. And that's because of this interpolator type. If I change this to, for instance, the Johann, cubic Bezier Johann, it gets rid of the weirdness, but the taper is kind of odd looking. You can adjust the smoothness to get it to look better, but I found that really to get the best tapers, you want to use this cubic Bezier fit. And that's because this interpolator basically will interpolate between these width nodes. Aw, sorry, Mahauer. So essentially what that means is that your stroke will be smooth all the way throughout if you taper your ends. So in order to get rid of this weirdness at the end here, you need to copy your width node. It's lagging for you guys. Local recording is complete. Anti-lag figured. Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry if you guys have some lag. Yeah, I don't know. Alright, it says it's perfectly streaming now. So, I don't know. Well, if it's lagging, I'm terribly sorry. And I'm hopefully going to be able to upload this on YouTube. I don't know, it said local recording complete. So hopefully that doesn't mean that the local recording, like, stopped. Because, yeah, I'd love to upload that to YouTube. Anyhow, so I'll continue on with this. Okay, good. So basically what you need to do to create a perfect taper here is copy this width node. And you do that by holding down Control on your keyboard and clicking on the node. And that duplicates the node in place. And you can drag the top node and basically bring it down to a point. So there you go. That's a nice smooth taper. And you can see it looks nice. It looks smooth. It fits with the rest of the stroke. If you're dealing with ponies, sometimes you might want to shift where the taper comes to. Like for instance, here is basically where the taper is at the widest, and then it's basically the stroke width. You can do that in two ways. You can do that by manually moving the point, but then you have to kind of eyeball where you want your stroke to be, which is kind of tricky if you're trying to make everything a uniform width. Alternatively, you can hold down Shift and click on the point, and it'll bring up this Modify Node Position dialog. And you can change the width, the position, so basically, if I wanted to, I could lower this width down to 5, and it would be looking weirdly. Or I can move this position to 0.3, and then it's a bit smoother of a taper, and it comes a little bit further out. The positioning is based on the number of nodes that you have. So for instance, if I move this to position 1, it'll be right at this node, this anchor node right here. This node right here, for instance, is at 1.5 because this is 1, this is 2, so right in between is 1.5. When you first add a power stroke, it adds 3 points. There's one that's right in the middle. There's one that is at 0.2 from the end, and one that's at 0.2 from the start. 0.2 from the end or the start. I mean, it depends on your stroke because it does rely on the number of anchor points. Is it lagging again? Because I'm getting a little bit of lag stuff here. Or are we good? Okay. Anyhow. So with the points being at 0.2, yeah, I think right now it's at, I don't really want to change it though in the middle because then I'd have to stop the stream and then restart it again, I believe. Let me see what my upload speed's at. Oh, not me. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna keep going with this. If you guys do have lag, let me know, or I'll try and figure something out. Or yeah, like Archive Alicorn's saying, you can try and set your quality to a little bit lower. Okay, so basically, also with Power Stroke, I mean, you can adjust the width of your points. So for instance, in a main, like if we're doing, let's just say we're doing Applejack's main because it's easy. I'm just gonna quickly do this. And yeah, this looks terrible, but you get the idea. So if this is, for instance, Applejack's tail, I can add a power stroke to it. And I'm going to set both of these to be at the very end and the very start. That's 5. And then I'm going to pull this out a bit so you can give it a little bit of definition, like that. And yeah, so that's basically power stroke. It's very useful, especially for creating these tapers. You can also create at the end, and then yeah, do the same here. If you wanted to delete a node, for instance, if you have too many nodes, you can hold down Alt and Control and click on one of these, and it deletes it. Another really nice thing about power strokes is that it gives you 2 extra join modes. One is this extrapolated mode and one is extrapolated arc. And basically what that does is if you have a really sharp corner like this, and let me pull this up size-wise, and if I add power stroke to it, with a regular miter, for instance, let me do something like this. With a miter, you can see how in a shape like this, it comes to basically where the stroke is. You can see that, like, where the outline ends, and then it basically just triangles out. If you use extrapolated, it will continue the curve at that point on both sides until it intersects, and it gives you a really nice point at the end there. Extrapolated arc does pretty much the same thing using just slightly different algorithms and can also handle tighter curves like that. Because I don't think extrapolated will be able to handle that. Yeah. So that's really nice, like with mains and stuff like that, where you have these sharp corners. And unfortunately, that is only available to Power Strokes, but it's a very nice feature to have available. Okay, so the next feature that I'll be going over is fill between strokes. And this was a feature that was introduced in Ponyscape version 0.1, I believe, or was it 0.2? One of those two. Basically, if you have two strokes, no, extrapolated arc should be there. Unless I forgot to enable... Oh, okay. That's probably because, okay. Mahope in the comments basically just said that extrapolated arc is not in the list for Linux. Basically, when I compiled for Windows, there's like a special definition to include experimental things, and unfortunately, the definition is in a different place for Linux and macOS builds, and I forgot to do that. So I will be releasing a patched version at the end of this weekend, and I'll make sure to change that and get it out to you guys. So yeah, sorry about that. It'll be in, yeah, by Monday, you'll have a different version. Okay, so fill between strokes is pretty nice, pretty self-explanatory. Basically, if you have two strokes like this, and you select both of them, you can do hit Control-Shift-F, or go Edit, Fill Between Strokes, and nope, not Control-Shift-F, it's Alt-Control-F, sorry. And basically, that will create this fill shape between the two strokes. Now, as you can see here, it's crisscrossed, and that's because if you have, for instance, some sort of weird shape like this, where it could go either way, yeah, you have to be able to tell which way the strokes are going. So what you can do to fix this is, if you go back into your path effects dialog, there's this reverse second checkbox. If you click that, it'll basically flip the second stroke, when it's calculating this fill, and it'll create a very nice fill for you. And if you push that to the end or to the bottom using end or home, then you basically have created a fill, and this fill will follow your strokes. So if you do something like that and you do that, it'll all automatically update, which is really nice. When you have a power stroke, you have to use fill between strokes, because it can Inkscape or Ponyscape will convert a power stroke internally to a path, so it's not really a stroke anymore. So you can't really fill it. So for instance, if I say power stroke, you can see down here that the fill is now set and the stroke is not set. And so yeah, you have to create a fill between path using power stroke. And let me just give that a little bit of color. There you go. Fill between path currently can be used with a single stroke, and it can also be used with two strokes. You can't use it with more strokes, unfortunately, currently. That's something that I'm working on for probably version 0.6. It's probably not going to make it in 0.5, because 0.5 is going to be a lot of bug fixes and usability issues, efficiencies, and stuff like that. But this is really nice. Also, what you can do is you can create multiple fill between strokes. So for instance, if you had another stroke like this, which is the same color as that, and same same size. You can select this stroke and also fill between those. So there you go. And yeah, if you do something like that, there you go. So it's pretty useful. Actually, in my latest vector that I did, as of this date, I did not use any self-defined fills. I used only fill between strokes, except for things like tongue and mouth kind of stuff. But yeah, let me just open that up quickly to show you guys. So this is my latest vector as of the time of recording. And every single fill that you see that's not, for instance, like a tongue, I should have closed that first, is a fill between. So for instance, Twilight's head, fill between strokes. Yeah, it's gonna lag kind of a lot because there's a lot of shading in here. But for her neck, that's a fill between. Body is all fill between. So everything's a fill between. It's very nice because it basically eliminates any fill issues that you could have. Let me close that. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and close and reopen that so you guys can see my desktop. Okay, so actually let me open up the journals for Ponyscape so I can just kind of go through what some of the other new features are. Okay. There. Thanks. And yes, I use undocked windows. I know a lot of people do dock their windows. And actually in version 0.5, I'm working on a new docking system that will help, because I know people have issues with dialogues retaining their size and position and stuff like that. And I'm also going to add docking to the left side of the screen, which will be nice. So, okay. So the next feature, which was introduced in Ponyscape version 0.2, is inverse clipping. And inverse clipping basically is the opposite of what a clip is. So for anyone who doesn't know, which everyone who vectors ponies should hopefully know what a clip is, basically if you define a shape above another shape and you right click and set clip, it'll basically take the intersection of those two shapes. I'm going to go ahead and do this without using ellipses because it gets kind of confusing. I use a mouse. I have a tablet, but I don't vector with a tablet. Okay. That question, there's a question by Muffin Derp, by the way, which asked if I used a mouse or a tablet. Yeah, for vectoring, I use a mouse. For sketching, I use a tablet. And I haven't really done much sketching, but I will change that eventually whenever I have free time. So basically, now that you know what a clip is, there's an inverse clip in Ponyscape, which if you right click and say set inverse clip, it'll basically cut out that that area. And what makes a clip different from, for instance, if you want to go select the objects and go path difference, is, as you can see, this basically will cut that out of the path, and you have that stroke there. If you apply blur to this shape and you do that, then it will blur the edge. Yeah, it'll blur the edge there, the inner edge. But if you inverse clip, it'll make it a hard edge. This is particularly useful for shading things. It's also kind of useful for making Twilight's horn, for anyone who hasn't thought about doing that. Unfortunately, it's not backwards compatible with Inkscape, though. So if you do use inverse clipping, you should probably put a little disclaimer if you release your SVG source to basically say that you need to use Ponyscape for it, because Inkscape, if you open a vector which has inverse clipping in Inkscape, it will basically look like it's been regularly clipped. So it'll look like that instead. Yeah, actually, let me open up. Let me open up this actually, which also has a lot of shading. So this is my Sweetie Belle vector, and basically a case of using inverse clipping with shading is right here on her main. This spiral basically has shading, which follows the spiral. And I basically, when I created this shading, I wanted it to be able to leak out onto her main, but not onto her ear or her face. So what I did was I took the ear and I inverse clipped it out of the clip that held the shading. It's a little complicated to understand. If you take a look, I have this vectors in my gallery, and you can open up the SVG source. Actually, I don't know if that one has the inverse clip in there. But yeah, it's just something. It's another thing that's very useful, especially when dealing with overlapping contours or objects and stuff like that. So that was introduced in Ponyscape version 0.2. And again, yeah, it is Ponyscape specific. So you need to, basically, if you release your SVG, you should tell people to open it with Ponyscape, because yeah, otherwise it won't work. All right, so in Ponyscape version 0.3, this new objects dialog was introduced. Let me close this and open this. So this objects dialog basically replaces your layers dialog. Hey. So if anyone's just joining us in the chat now, feel free to ask anything about Ponyscape, and I will go over it. Because this is basically just meant to be an overview of the new features and how to use them, and whatnot. So let's see. This is, where's my layers dialog? This is my layers dialog. And in this vector, I used 2 layers. But that's because I used mostly groups. Yeah, you can use the layers dialog in conjunction with the objects dialog, because the objects dialog gets pretty crowded really fast. Basically, what the objects dialog is it's a collection of everything that's in your vector. So it's your layers, it's your groups, it's your paths, your strokes, your images, your, I don't even know, circles, ellipses, you name it. it's all here. You can see everything here. If you select something in here, it'll select it in your image. You can basically show and hide different objects. You can lock and unlock different objects. So it's kind of similar to what you could do with layers before, but now you can do it for everything. Also, you can change layers to groups and groups to layers, like vice versa. So I don't know. I actually prefer groups, but if you prefer working with layers, you can change a group to a layer and back and forth and back and forth. The difference basically being that groups, you can select a group. For instance, let me see what's a group in here. Twilight's horn is a group of objects. So here you can see G10450 is the group that represents Twilight's horn. And you can select it as a group, and then you can move it or stretch it or scale it or whatever you want to do with it. And then to enter it, you can double click it, and now you can select things within the horn group. And then to exit it, you double click outside. But let's say that you didn't want this to be a group. You wanted to be able to select the individual objects without having to double click on the group. You can click this button here, and it converts it to a layer. So then you basically just will select everything. And I can convert it back. And so now it will select the whole group. It's kind of a nice feature. I haven't really used it much because if you just double click on a group, you're basically in the group. But I could see where it would be useful. New in Ponyscape version 0.4, there's this column, which is there's an arrow pointing up, and if you click it, it changes to an arrow pointing down. Basically, that is the insert order. So, for instance, when I draw anything in my stroke layer right now, it will be above everyone, or Twilight, basically, in this case. So if I draw that, it creates a shape that's above Twilight. If I change this to a down arrow and I draw something, it will be drawn below Twilight. So it just basically changes the insert order. And that is basically for every group, every layer, you get an arrow. So you can change that, which is nice. Again, I haven't really used it much, but it's there. In this column, in the objects dialog, you can see what is being clipped currently, which is good for keeping track of things that have clipping on them. So for instance, this object is currently being clipped. I don't really know what this object is. But for instance, if I release the clip, then you can see your clip and the object. So there's a symbol for clipping, which is like this. There's a symbol for inverse clipping, which on her horn, I believe, no, I guess not. There's a separate symbol for inverse clipping, and there's also a symbol for masking. So it's nice for keeping track of things. This final column, besides the name, is basically if you have outlines on, or when you like go over the objects in question, like in your document, it will change the color of this outline that you see here. So for instance, if I wanted Gadget's ear to, instead of being a bright green outline, I can change it to, for instance, a red outline. To change the object's outline color, you have to set the alpha channel to something greater than 0. And then it will change it to red, as you can see here. And you can also see in the objects dialog, it changed to red. If you change the alpha to 0, it inherits it from what is above it. So for instance, if it's part of a group, it'll inherit from the group if the group's color is set, and if not, then it will just keep going all the way up. And if you don't set any of these, then it's just going to be the default that's defined in preferences here in the node tool in the path outline. Okay, so actually one other thing you can do in the objects list is you can also rename everything, basically. So I did not, unfortunately, and I'm really disorganized like that, but you know. But for instance, here, her upper main is a group, and I renamed it. You can also rename your individual paths and strokes and stuff like that. For instance, this is a lighting shape that's on top of her horn. So I can double click that and say horn lighting. And then you can keep better track of your objects in your in the objects dialog. In here, you can also set blurs, opacity, blend mode, which is similar to what you could do in the layers dialog, but now you can do it on any object and not just your layer. So actually, this is kind of really cool. I hope it doesn't freeze everything like the stream. Is actually, no. I need this image on. And if I change this blend mode to multiply, you can kind of, the sketch kind of comes through, which is really cool. I haven't really used blend modes in particular before, but I think multiply probably gives it a pretty comic-y effect, and it can be used for other things too, which, yeah, kind of cool. So that's basically the objects dialog. Oh, another thing you can do with the objects dialog is you can select objects and move them out of groups and into groups and stuff like that. You can also select multiple objects at a time. Holding shift down selects a range, and holding control down allows you to toggle things like that. When you have multiple items selected, if you click on any of these icons, so like show and hide, or lock and unlock, or even the highlight color, it'll set it for everything that's selected. If you have selected items and you click one of these icons for something that's not selected, it'll just toggle that one thing. And that's actually very important for what I'm going to talk about next, which is the new tags dialog. And tags is introduced in Ponyscape version 0.4, and you can get there by going Object Tags. I'm not on the actual Inkscape dev team. I could be if I wanted to, because I've submitted enough patches to it, and they've actually been trying to get me to submit more. And I do plan on submitting some of these features back into Inkscape, but there's a lot of differences with Ponyscape from Inkscape that you know, kind of make Ponyscape unique and probably would not fit into Inkscape. So yeah, the project is not going anywhere. It's definitely staying. Yes, the Inkscape dev team does know about Ponyscape. I got an email actually from the head of the Inkscape development team, basically thanking me for patches into upstream and saying that they checked out Ponyscape and they thought it was really cool, and they were hoping that I would submit some more patches upstream to Inkscape, which I do plan on doing, just once I get the time to do it. And so I responded and said, yeah, you know, thanks. It's pretty awesome. I do plan on submitting upstream. So that was pretty cool. I didn't expect like the head of the Inkscape development team to be contacting me, but that's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so the tags dialog was introduced in Inkscape 0 or Ponyscape 0.4, which was just released this past week. And basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to group your objects, objects basically in your image, without changing the layering order. And this is very useful for a lot of things. Basically, I have a tag in here which is called shading, and in the shading tag I have a lot of objects. I haven't tagged all of the shading, but this is just like a demonstration. So basically, when I click the shading tag, it selects all of the shading objects that I have in this tag group. If, for instance, there's a piece of shading that I did not tag, I can come over, select it, and click this little plus sign next to the tag, and it will add it to the items list up at the top. If you select objects within the tags group, it'll select just that object. But so basically, what you can do is select your tag, which will select all of the objects that you have tagged. And then if you come into your objects dialog, you can then hide or show all of the selected items, lock or unlock selected items. You can also change the fill or stroke for the selected item. Sorry, for the selected items. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So I'm just going to close this up and give you a little bit of a more basic overview of tags. So for instance, if I have a circle and I have then a square or rectangle, and then I have another circle on top of that. And I'll make this a different color so it's a little bit easier to see the difference. Okay, so if I wanted to add a tag to just select the circle objects in here, I can click the plus sign to create a new tag and double click it, click the name to change the name. So I'm going to say circles. And then I'm going to select both of my circles and click the plus sign next to the tag. So now if I click on circles, it'll just select the two circles, regardless of the layering order, which is really nice. You can include multiple, or you can put the same item into multiple tags. So actually, for instance, if this was like a yellowy, and this was back to that color green, I can add another tag, which is called greens, and then I can select these objects and add it to the greens tag. So now if I select greens, it just selects the green items. If I select circles, it just selects the circles item. You can reorganize your tags by clicking and dragging. You can also nest tags. So if you click and drag into another tag, it'll add it to that tag. So now if I click on circles, it'll also select everything within the greens, which that's not a circle, so it doesn't really make sense, but it's kind of cool. For instance, if you have two characters in a vector that you're working on, you can tag one character and then tag the other character, and then if you wanted to add a tag for the shading of each character individually, you can also tag the shading underneath the character. So if you select the character, it'll also select all the shading, but you can also just select the shading, which is kind of cool. So yeah, this is extremely useful in instances where you have shading, because Ponyscape or Inkscape or really any vectoring program tends to lag when you have a lot of shading. So I'm going to pull up this vector again once it loads. And unfortunately, I developed the tags system after I completed this vector, so I did not tag everything, like all of the shading and stuff like that. But you can see where it would come into play, because if I had tagged all of the shading, I can hide the shading and then work on the vector without any lag from trying to render out the shading, which is nice. I mean, the alternative, which I just discovered not too long ago. You can disable filters. Oop, E. Okay, so you can disable filters by going View, Display Mode, No Filters, which basically will flatten out all of your shading, which that's kind of a cool effect. It also prevents it from lagging as much. But then you still have these objects visible. So if you really wanted to get rid of your shading, this would be the way to do it, through a tag, and then, yeah. So it's basically a two-click system. First to select the items, and then second to show and hide them. Yeah, you can also lower the render quality. Thanks, Archive Alicorn. You can, in Preferences, I believe it's Rendering, you can lower the Gaussian blur quality for display to the lowest quality, fastest, and that will basically prevent the lag. But if you really want to prevent lag, you can show and hide your shading stuff. It's also helpful if you're like working on a character that are characters that overlap. For instance, here, Gadget's ear is in front of Twilight's mane, but behind Twilight's ear. So you can tag all of Twilight and all of Gadget, and then show and hide them separately, which is kind of nice. You couldn't do that beforehand because like you couldn't put all of Twilight on a layer, and you couldn't put all of Gadget on a layer because of this, and also because of Gadget's fingers. So yeah, that's tags. It's pretty nifty. It's just another tool in the toolbox. So let's see. Next thing to talk about is the new swatches system. Let me just pull up the latest journal entry. Make sure. Tagging system. Actually, before we get into the new swatches, I'm going to go over some new path effects that you can find in Ponyscape. So I'm going to close this, and basically in the path effects dialog, there are a couple of new path effects. One is a bounding box path effect. This was introduced in Ponyscape 0.4. I don't really know what it would be useful for, but I added it just because I felt like adding it. So you can select bounding box. You basically you create a shape, not like that. You create a shape, and it's gonna move anyway. You add a bounding box, and then you copy whatever you want to apply the bounding box to, and paste it as the linked path. So it's going to bound to currently the geometric bounds, so you can see how it splits the stroke kind of into. You can also change that to the visual bounds, so it'll encompass the entire object, and that basically will also happen if you up the blur. So that's the whole bounding box. That could be, I guess it could be useful for creating frames and stuff to make sure that you have everything within the frame. And yeah. But besides that, I don't really know what it could be useful for currently. So delete those. Something that's really, really useful is I added the ellipse by 5 point path effect. And the original ellipse by 5 point was an extension, which you can find under extensions. I believe it's generate from path, and it's ellipse by 5 points. And this was originally written by EPDTRY. I don't really know how to pronounce that. So thanks to him for that. And I basically took that and I modified it into a path effect. So all you have to do is you draw 5 points. Oh, there we go. and apply the ellipse by 5 points path effect. And now you can update your 5 points, and the ellipse changes dynamically at runtime. If there's no ellipse that fits, you'll get basically just the original shape until you create an ellipse that fits from 5 points. So this is really, really useful for creating eyes. Yes, it is amazing. So for instance, let me go ahead and open pictures. Are you a PNG? Yeah, you're a PNG. Wow, that's really bad quality, but okay. So here's what we can basically do is make 5 points around the eye, add the ellipse by 5 point path effect, and then you can go ahead and just tweak it. And there you go. Yeah, and you can also use it for like pupils and stuff like that. Yeah. It's really, really useful. And actually, EPDTRY, again, I don't know how to pronounce it. He contacted me on Reddit saying that he had originally intended for his ellipse by 5 point extension to be a path effect, but he didn't have any method for distributing it to people. So that, this was kind of an awesome idea for doing that because, it's basically Inkscape for ponies. So yeah, that should help make creating eyes really easy for you guys. I used that in this Twilight vector that I keep coming back to. And every time it takes forever to load, but I keep coming back to it anyway. So Twilight's eyes are made using that ellipse by 5 point thing. The shines I did not for some reason. I'm not sure why. But yeah, for instance, her iris or retina or whatever you want to call it is 5 points. Use the ellipse by 5 point path effect. All right, there's another path effect, which is the attach path effect. And this I also used in that vector, but I'm not going to bring it up again because I bring it up way too often. Yes, all of these objects you can use in clipping. You can also use them to fill between strokes, which is not something that you could have done in Inkscape, but I fixed that in Ponyscape. Okay, so for instance, let's say you have these two strokes and you wanted to connect them, but you wanted to keep them on different layers, or you wanted to, for instance, change their style in between. You can apply the attach path effect, and this has a lot of options here. You can see that this is the end of the path based on this directional arrow. So I'm going to copy this path, Control C, and I'm going to paste that into the end path. And it basically will take this and attach it to the other path. And where it attaches it is it first attaches it at I believe the start point. Yes. But you can change that. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that down to here. But as you can see, it's still tangent to the start point. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around, and you can adjust the angles in here. So I'm just going to say 180 to make it tangent, and Unfortunately, you can't hold down Control, but you can always go ahead and readjust your angles. 180. And here, I'm going to pull this out a little bit and keep that at 0. So now, now you can basically change your stroke color. And you can see, actually, let me change this to 10 and this to 10 as well. You can see that the stroke changes. If you move this stroke, it'll update, and it'll keep this tangent to the end there. And same thing here. It'll keep a tangent. You might want to drag this out a little bit more. And again, you can change your angles in here. You can also change the distance in here. So if it's looking a little bit wonky, you can go ahead and edit it manually there. There is a bit of an issue here in that if basically this distance here is not equal to this distance here, you might get a little bit of a gap here. And the easiest way to fix that is just to add an end cap, which like a rounded end cap. So for instance here, rounded end cap, and that basically gets rid of that and keeps it tangent, and yeah. So it's pretty useful. It's another thing that's kind of in the step towards animation, which I know it's kind of early to talk about that, but Ponyscape is eventually, hopefully, going to have animation capabilities, which would be awesome. So this attach path effect can also attach, basically, like for instance, if you have a leg. Let me just do this really quickly. And this is going to be a horrible, horrible leg. Basically, I can take this and paste it. And yeah, this is looking pretty bad, but I can fix that fairly easily by doing this and this. So there you go. So that's like a hind leg. And if you move this around, it also moves that around. If you move these points up, it keeps those like that. If you move the whole leg up, it'll readjust to attach it to that path. So it keeps it attached to the path no matter what, which is nice. Okay, so I guess the last thing that I kind of want to go over in this tutorial, which is, holy cow, it's already been an hour. Wow. Okay, so the last thing to go over is the new swatch system. And this is by far the biggest change in Ponyscape from Inkscape. So it's a little bit confusing at first, but it's really, I find it really nice. Everyone that I've talked to so far has said it's really nice. Someone who I'm not going to name, who uses Illustrator, I showed this to them, and they said that this is better than Illustrator's swatch system, but don't tell anyone who uses Illustrator. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close a bunch of these dialogues, and I'll open up the swatches dialog. So Control-Shift-W or view swatches. When you open this up, you can see your document swatches. So these are all of the swatches that are within your current document. Currently, there's none because I haven't added any swatches, I haven't imported any swatches, etc., etc. You can also edit your built-in swatches by going to Edit Built-in. You can't edit the colors in here. But you can change the order for your built-in swatches. And you can also add swatch groups or import swatch files. I'll get to that in a bit. But basically, for normal everyday use, you would add a swatch, and these are all of the built-in swatches that you can add. So for instance, if you're working with ponies, you can go into MLP and click all, and it will add all of the pony swatches to your document. And this basically includes the base MLP swatches, so white, black, teeth, and mouth swatches. And then it also includes all of the ponies that you see here. Actually, those are a little out of order, but that's okay. Okay, so basically what you do is you just click on a swatch and it will apply it. And if you shift click on a swatch, it'll apply it as the stroke. And you can see, you might not be able to see on the video, but if you go ahead and try this out, you can see that the two swatches that I selected are indented here and also down here. So you can see what swatches you have selected currently. Ponyscape, and actually Inkscape for that matter, stores document swatches as single stop gradients. So you can basically tell when what you've selected is a specific swatch. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work well with Adobe Illustrator because it doesn't really understand how to deal with single stop gradients, even though it's valid SVG code. So if you're making a vector for Illustrator or that people can open in Illustrator and you don't really care about some more of the advanced features of the swatches dialog, you can check this don't link button down here, in which case if you click a swatch, it just sets the color. And if you shift click, it just sets the stroke color. You can see here, because it doesn't link it to the actual swatch, that it doesn't basically press in the swatches. And if you go into your stroke and paint in the fill in stroke dialog, you can see that they're just solid colors. But if you aren't making a vector that people can open in Illustrator, or that people can open easily in Illustrator, you can uncheck the don't link button and then basically link your object to the swatches. And you can see in here that it changes to the swatch button. Now, I know that some people have had issues when you're creating new swatches with the swatch button, which is going to be fixed in the patched version that will be released hopefully by the end of this weekend. But anyhow, so if you wanted to change a swatch color in here, you can basically select an object that has the swatch linked, and if you see that the swatch button is pressed in the fill or the stroke, you can go ahead and change it, and it will update your object and also the swatch in here. So everything that uses that swatch will also be updated at the same time. So for instance, if I have another shape like this, which has the same fill and the same stroke swatches, and if I change the fill, it updates everything. So if you need to tweak a color, for instance, like if you have a pony and you're using a fill swatch and the fill is a little bit off, or if you wanted to make it like a nighttime fill, for instance, like with Applejack, if you wanted to change this to a nighttime Applejack fill, actually there we go. You can lower down the lightness and the saturation, and just kind of tweak it a little bit to get it more into, I guess, the mood of your piece. And it will adjust everything with the same swatch. If you wanted to replace a swatch color completely, for instance, if you are doing a recolor of something, you can basically create an object with that color. So I'm going to make this like a really nasty yellow, actually. And if I have this shape selected, I can right click on a swatch in here, and I can say set to selected fill, in which case it'll change the color of the swatch, which updates everything that already has that swatch, and it'll also set this shape to have that swatch as the fill. So that's a pretty easy way to do recolors. I'm thinking about adding something where you can right click and there'll be a set to fill, and you can select a color from a different swatch within your document. But I don't know, this is probably easy enough for now to do that. So let me Control Z that. Okay, so that's basically how you use swatches. You can also, if you wanted to, right click and say set fill. That's the same thing as just clicking. Set stroke is the same thing as just shift clicking. You can also move left or move right your swatch colors in your document. You can move an entire swatch group up or down. You can duplicate a swatch group. So for instance, if you, like, let's say you have an Applejack swatch and you wanted to add an Applejack nighttime swatch, you can duplicate it and then create an Applejack nighttime swatch. Unfortunately, you can't rename swatch groups in here, but if you go into the Edit tab, you'll be able to see all of your swatches and colors and stuff like that. And there, it's kind of like in the Objects dialog, where if you double click on it, you can rename it and say Applejack Night. And then in here, it updates to Applejack Night. Also in here, you can basically click on swatches without having them selected. So you can then go ahead and delete them. You can also remove swatch groups, etc., etc. You can also add swatch groups in here, like the grays, which there's a lot of swatches in the grays group. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Okay, so let's say that you're starting with a new document. Oh, by the way, when you save your document, these swatches are all saved with your document, so that if anyone opens up your document, they'll have all the swatches there as well, which is nice. So let's say you're starting with a new document and you have, like, let's say you're making an OC pony of yours, and you have, again, I'm going to take these not so nice colors and use those as an example. Hey, Pink Dash. Okay, so basically, you have a couple of options here for creating swatches for your OC. And in Inkscape 0.4, the current release, unfortunately, if you click on this swatch button, Ponyscape will crash. That's going to be fixed by the end of this weekend. So if anyone's listening to this on YouTube, it probably is already fixed. Yeah, assuming that I can upload this to YouTube because it's already 1 hour and 8 minutes. Good Lord. Okay, so what you can do currently is if you right click on the base, because base is always going to be there, right click on base and you can say add selected fill or add selected stroke. And that'll basically create a swatch and set the object to use the swatch. Add selected stroke. And if you go into edit, you can see there's your objects. You can double click on them and say like OC fill and OC stroke. And now if you hover over these, you'll get a tooltip which says OC fill and OC stroke. And that's nice, but it's only within your base group. So if you right click on base and you say save as new group, it'll move them into a swatch group. And you can come over here and say like my OC, and then you have your my OC swatch group. This is saved in your document, So for instance, let me go ahead and save this. Save. And I'm just going to save it here. And I'm going to call it swatches. Yeah, just swatches.svg. Okay, so if you're starting a new document, you have a couple of options. Like if you're starting a document for your OC and you have this palette already created in a different document, it's a little tongue twister kind of. Sorry about that. If I'm not explaining something clearly, let me know. But okay, so basically, if you have that document and you want to start a new document of your OC, you have a couple of options. First off, you can import your swatches into the built-in swatches, or you can just add your swatch to your swatches dialog. If you click on the plus sign down here, you can add a swatch file, and you can add an SVG file, or you can add a GPL file. GPL is a GIMP palette file, which is what Inkscape uses for swatches. Ponyscape uses SVG files. So let me go ahead and find that swatches, and there you go. So I added the swatch file and it imported my OC. It'll only import swatches which are in a group. So anything that you have in your document that's just saved under base won't be imported if you use the add swatch file or import swatch file. So this, I just clicked add swatch file, so that's only going to be included in this document. If you want to add it to your built-in, you can come into edit built-in, click the plus symbol, and go import swatch file, and then add swatches. And it will create a group called swatches.svg, and under there is my OC. You can grab my OC and pull it out, and then just delete the swatches.svg group. So then when you come to use, you can click on the plus sign, my OC, and everything is there. So anytime that you start a new document, you can click on the plus sign and just grab your OC colors. You can also just throw it into the MLP group. So I'll bring it up to the MLP group. I'll throw it in here. And then if I add MLP all, it'll be included in there, my OC. And I'm just going to go through and remove all of these. Or I could just go through and revert back to the beginning. Oh, right. Close. Okay. So alternatively to importing it in your built-in tab, you can say import swatch file in the use or the edit tab, and then when you import swatches.svg, it'll add it to your document swatches, and it will also import it to your built-in swatches. And the reason that it creates this .svg group is because you could have multiple swatch groups within your swatch file. So it's a little bit of an inconvenience, but you know, it organizes it a little bit better. And yeah, so you can go into swatches.svg and load all or my OC. So if you're creating swatches like for someone else to use, like if you're creating a swatch file with a lot of background ponies or something like that, you can create an SVG with all of the swatch groups that you want included, save the SVG, upload it somewhere, whatever, link the person to that SVG, and then they can download the SVG and just simply add the swatches from there. which is really nice because you don't have to mess around with the file system with moving GPL files or anything like that. What else is really nice is that you can now have gradient swatches as built-in swatches. So if you have something like this and you have a gradient, which is kind of defined like that, I can say add selected fill, and you can see it's a gradient there. And you can save that in an SVG file. You can add it to your built-in swatches. So for instance, for eyes, we currently don't have gradient swatches for the eyes in the built-in MLP swatches, but we'll probably do that for Ponyscape 0.5. But you could technically do that for eyes. So you select your eye color or your eye shape, and it'll automatically create the gradient for you, and then you have to just adjust where the gradient goes, like top to bottom. So that's a quick rundown of the swatch system. I'm working through a couple of bugs with it currently, but yeah, if anyone has any other suggestions on how to make it better or nicer to use or anything like that, just let me know. So hopefully this should make creating swatches easier, importing swatches easier, everything like that. Do the color changing thing. I already did that. I showed them already. I showed them that. Pinky Dash. I'll show it again. Okay, so if you have, for instance, if you're recoloring a Rainbow Dash into an Applejack, you basically create a shape that has Applejack's colors, and then I click on that, select till selected fill, and set to selected stroke, and I've just recolored. Yep. Set till selected stroke, and I've just recolored Rainbow Dash. So, yeah, that's basically how you do the new swatch system. And yeah, I know a lot of people were talking about how this was too small in Inkscape or Ponyscape 0.4, and there's a certain person who's in the chat right now who's to blame for that, but I won't name names. Basically, if you have a small monitor, if the swatches are really big at the bottom, it cuts off some of the useful tools like the gradient editor and the dropper tool and stuff like that. So I shrunk it down, but I shrunk it down too small in Ponyscape 0.4, so I made it larger already, and I will be releasing this in the patched version by the end of the weekend. So that'll be a little bit better. At least you can select your items and scroll and stuff like that. So yeah. If anyone who's listening to this has any bugs that they would like to fix, or like if Ponyscape is crashing, anything like that, you can go to the Ponyscape Vectors group. And currently there is a, Ponyscape version 0.4 patched coming soon. You can submit bug reports there. These are just bugs that have been introduced with Ponyscape version 0.4. If you want to just submit bug reports in general, you can either submit them as comments on our page, or you can submit them under the reporting bugs, or send them to us as notes. But please make sure to include all of the information in the reporting bugs journal. So basically like computer operating system, stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. People in the chat are talking about the persona on Firefox, and yes, it's very nice. Yeah, so if you include all of this information, it'll help us to debug it, debug the bug, fix the issue, and hopefully, get that out to you guys quicker. Archive Alicorn is asking me to show you guys fire, so I will show you guys fire. Okay. Filters, protrusions, fire. There we go. Fire. What did you want me to show them about fire exactly? That it's nice? That it taxes my CPU like none other? Yeah, it's pretty cool. There are some new features that I will hopefully be introducing in 0.5 possibly, but definitely in 0.6. One is a template system. So like, for instance, adding horns or ears or stuff like that. Just for basic poses, anything that like is advanced. I mean, obviously you have to vector it yourself, but templates would be really nice to have. And yes, Pinky Dash in the chat is saying Circle to Pony. There will be an extension called Circle to Pony, which will basically do this. Hold on a second. That. But yeah, that's all eventual stuff. Yeah, have you not seen this? This is the best. Step 1, circle. Step 2, pony. Yeah. So yeah, and I also kind of want to look into some more filters stuff, because some of these are really cool. It's really interesting. If you haven't already taken a look, and you have some free time, or you just want to kind of mess around in Ponyscape or even Inkscape, you can do a lot with these filters, like with fire and stuff like that. It's kind of complicated, but like you can change things around and make it awesome. Except I don't know why that keeps deselecting or whatever. But yeah. So I haven't played around with any of these filters yet, but it looks pretty cool. So I hope that you guys enjoy Ponyscape 0.4, and I will be fixing some of the issues that people have been having, and I will be adding some more new features to Ponyscape 0.5, which I'm guessing will come out in probably a month or so. I don't know, I'm kind of busy with work and stuff, and I kind of want to do a vector again because I haven't in a long time. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask on the Ponyscape Vectors Club on DeviantArt, so ponyscape-vectors.deviantart.com, and we'll be able to help you guys out. And if you have bugs, report them, because yeah, we want to fix them. So thank you guys again, and I will hopefully upload this to YouTube if I'm allowed to, and I will hopefully also be uploading some more tutorials at some point. And if not, I know Rainbow Rage, who has done some Inkscape tutorials, wanted to do some Ponyscape tutorials, like more in depth on these features. So stay tuned for them. Hopefully he's gonna be able to find some time to do those. So thanks, and I will see you guys later. Bye.